Hi, my name is Genesee Kuzel, and I'm doing my presentation today on American Sign Language. Most people assume that American Sign Language is a visual form of English, but that's not really true. It's a pretty easy language to learn because it is purely visual, but it's really complex and it has its own grammar rules that are completely different from English. Keep in mind that I'm talking about American Sign Language. There's a lot of different sign languages. There's usually one for each country, as well as dialects within those languages. So for example, someone who's from New York probably signs a lot differently than I do. I've only taken one semester of sign language here at Yavapai College, so I'm by no means an expert, but I know about 500 words, I think. So that might seem like a lot, but if you really think about it, like what if you could only speak 500 words in English? It's not a whole lot, but I can still communicate with people pretty well on like a very basic level. One of the cool things about sign language is that sometimes you can understand what people are talking about even without knowing the signs that they're using, since a lot of what they're doing is representative of the actions that it means. Deaf Americans, as well as mutes, use sign language as their main form of communication, as well as the family and friends of the people who know sign language and have to use it. And some parents even teach their babies sign language as they grow up, even though they don't need to know it, per se. So, sign language got started in the 1800s when there was a man named Dr. Cogswell. He had a deaf daughter named Alice, and he couldn't stand to have her institutionalized, which is unfortunately what happened to most deaf Americans at the time. Their next-door neighbor had a son named Thomas Hopkins who would communicate with Alice and realized that she was actually a really smart kid. And so he wanted to help deaf children, so he approached her father and they wanted to start a school for the deaf. Gallaudet, both of their neighbors, traveled overseas all the way over to France to learn methods for teaching the deaf. The French were very secretive and they didn't really want to help him. They kind of shut him out. But he did find a man who was willing to help him and he brought him back to the United States with him. His name was Laurent Clerc, and together they started teaching deaf children. The kids who were living at the school at the time would come up with their own signs for things in the dorms that they preferred over Laurent Clerc's signs. So they used that in a combination with signs that Clerc taught him, and their ASL was born. There's actually still Gallaudet University today, which is, I think, it's the only university for deaf Americans, even though there are other colleges, it's the only university. Even though ASL is different than English, they still use the same alphabet. So a lot of the hand shapes that you use are representative of the letters that they are. For example, A, when you flip it upside down, kind of looks like an A with the stem. B looks like the line between the two bubbles. C, and so on. Not all of the letters look like the letters that they're representing though. For example, this is the letter F. It doesn't really look like the letter F. So you don't use fingerspelling to sign out everything because that would be terribly time consuming, but you use it to spell out things like names, and it looks like this. Genesee was how I would spell my name. The other part of sign language is signing. That's the sign for signing. And you use that to represent specific words. So when you combine that with fingerspelling, you get full sentences. Like I said before, the grammar is a lot different in sign language than it is in English. For example, in English we would say, "What's your name?" But in sign language it would be, "Your name what?" So you kind of just change it around, and when you verbalize the signs as you go, it almost sounds kind of like broken English. It's very topic comment. It's a really, really important language, especially since, people who are deaf, that's the only option that they have. So in conclusion, I think that American Sign Language is very, very important and should definitely be more widely used, and I hope you'll take as much interest in it as I have. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.